welcome. Thank you so much. It is my great pleasure to be able to moderate a conversation for this section on the state of education in Colorado with a good friend, fellow former member of Congress, former business innovator, and now governor of Colorado, Jared Polis. Governor, thank you for being with us. Hope things are going well in Colorado today.
They are. We're excited about the All-Star game, as you might imagine. And it's really good to see you, Glenn. In addition to having served in Congress together, Glenn and I were on the congressional baseball team together.
That's right. Some good memories. Well, thank you, Governor, for doing this. Let me jump right in and ask you kind of a first broad question based on the theme of this year's RISE conference, which is disrupted from crisis to innovation. And as we move out of what was quite a difficult year for, I'm sure, Coloradans and Americans all across the country, looking forward, what are your top priorities moving Colorado ahead from where we are now, whether by executive action or through work with the legislature? How would you categorize your top priorities for education in Colorado?
So I think that's a great theme. There's been a lot of disruption. There's a lot of learning from the global pandemic. The question is, when life gives you lemons, how do you make lemonade? I absolutely think there's, sort of archaic legacy systems that should have been broken, were broken, and now we can rebuild better than before. What do some of those things mean? I think we've all seen the increased role of individualized, personalized education. In many ways, the kind of ability to tailor an education to kids jumped light years forwards with regards to the technology, the systems in this crisis. Another thing that we've been focused on in Colorado is how do we make sure that students, when they graduate high school, are ready for the workforce and success. If they're going on to a four-year university, great, but what about students that aren't? How can they graduate high school with an associate's degree, a certificate skill, or perhaps having had the benefit of an apprenticeship in their junior or senior year that leads to a good job after high school. We're expanding and replicating these across the state of Colorado. One of the things we did with the CARES Act funding in education, the piece that went to the state, is we created a competitive grant system. We also called it RISE, so it's kind of a coincidence that that's one of the titles of some of the things you're doing. So we had great innovation. We asked districts, what would you do if you had the resources? That breaks down silos, partnership with your community college, partnership with your business community, and we're able to fund over a dozen projects that are multi-year innovative projects across our state that break down silos between different groups of adults that really held progress in education back.
You raised questions about skill sets and workforce development. Having been someone who was a business innovator yourself, how do you think about connecting the needed skill sets that will be developed during the educational phase with the industries that are present in Colorado? You've got a dynamic set from agriculture to aerospace, a lot of high-tech companies now moving into Colorado. How do you think about connecting up that skills part with the workforce side?
That's right, and that's why skills-based preparation is such a great issue and challenge, regardless of whether you're a Republican or Democrat or what your perspective is, because it's good for the individual, right? How can somebody get out of the hourly minimum wage economy and instead of earning $12 or $14 an hour, earn a salary with benefits? And it's great for the growth of the business community. The business community needs, and one of the things that Colorado prides itself on, is a great workforce. And that means we need to align the preparation and the training that young people get, people of all ages get. Sometimes it's mid-career going back for a training into a new field, but often it's young people in high school or community college with the growing needs of the workforce. So we've identified our 10 fastest growing sectors. We're aligning a lot of our apprenticeship and certificate work for high school completion with making sure that kids are prepared for the next great generation of jobs in our state.
How do you think about the challenge of ensuring equitable outcomes, whether it's challenges related to internet access or other challenges? How do you think about solving for the equity of opportunity across your state?
So there's a lot of dimensions to that, and we could probably have an entire, hour-long discussion just about equity. Certainly, with regard to high-speed internet access in a big state like ours, we do have a digital divide with many rural areas and young people in their homes simply not having high-speed access, difficulty with online education, remote work. We have a major initiative around expanding broadband internet access. It's one of the uses that we are deploying from our Rescue Act and CARES Act funds. We also have areas where it's underserved urban areas because of lower income levels. We're trying to move and we're able to have state-supported Wi-Fi in many areas, and it's easier to solve from a technological perspective and less expensive. But we really have both aspects of that. And if you can't get onto the highway, you can't get to work. And same with the digital highway. We need to make sure that people have access to all the great opportunities that exist in this day and age with the interconnectivity we have. We're particularly excited about location-independent employment in our state, and especially another one of those disruptive innovations in the wake of the pandemic is that not everybody works from home all the time, but a lot more people can work from home, and they can live in beautiful Western Colorado with mountains in their backyard, and they can still be a meaningful part of a company that's based in Chicago or Denver or Texas or California. And we're seeing more and more of that in our state, and we're trying to make sure that we can keep up from a connectivity perspective.
Governor, you have said that you want to make Colorado a leader in early childhood education. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you made that an important facet of your work on education in Colorado? And have there been any lessons that you've learned along the way that you think might be useful as templates for other states who might think that is a critical area of focus?
Yeah, if there's one thing that I hope to accomplish as governor, it's from Colorado to move from a laggard to a leader in early childhood education. Why? There's several reasons. One is it simply has the best return on investment, or ROI, of really any investment we can make. There's been several long-term longitudinal studies over decades that show every dollar invested in quality early childhood education is accretive, will create over $7 to $10 in savings for taxpayers over the next generation, and reducing grade repetition, reducing youth adjudication and incarceration, and of course, not to mention all the increased earning potential. The early years are so important for kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, and like many parents in Colorado, I was able to afford preschool for my kids. What about families that can't? And what about those who struggle to afford it and make great sacrifices? So one of the first things we got done when I was elected governor, Colorado only had half-day kindergarten for free. Parents had to pay for full-day kindergarten, $400 a month. So that created a divide right there between parents that could pay and parents that couldn't. We now have full-day kindergarten. We also pulled together a broad coalition around a nicotine tax that funds preschool for every child in Colorado. It passed overwhelmingly. In this day and age, Glenn, 67% of Colorado voters voted for our preschool initiative. It brought together rural and urban counties, Republicans and Democrats. It's hard to get 67% of the people to agree on anything in this day and age, but they all agree kids should have preschool. And I'm proud to say that that starts in 2023. And we're setting up that mechanism now for preschool, as well as creating a Department of Early Childhood Education to really pull together all the efforts and having a laser-like focus on the birth through 5 years.
Let me just pick up on a thread you opened about kindergarten and parents. And I think one of the things that we learned through the past year is the importance of all these linkages. In other words, parents don't just depend on schools for helping with education, but also they need to go to work, or they have to orient their day around the way the schools are set up. And last year we learned some lessons. And I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts on if we can think of the pandemic in some ways as kind of a stress test on ourselves, on our children, on our families, on our institutions. What do you think are some of the most important lessons that we can take from that are useful looking forward in how we handle these questions?
Yeah, we saw nationally, Colorado is no exception, a decline of participation of women in the workforce to the lowest level since the 1980s as a direct result of many having to become the supervisor for their own children when the schools were out of session. In Colorado, we made return to education a big priority. We pulled together a back to school task force last year. Our schools most districts were in session all year in person. The bigger urban districts were in session at least second semester in person. And that was very important for the kids first and foremost, but frankly also for workplace equity, for a successful economy, and for the earning potential of women in the workforce.
Let me pick up on another thing you raised about the challenge of finding common ground these days. And I'm interested in your thoughts on how we can best think about the approach of our education system, not simply in preparing students to either go on to higher education or enter the workforce, but to be citizens. How do you think about that part of the challenge? Because it seems like, as you've alluded to, it's harder and harder these days to just practice sort of basic communication, good citizenry, listening to each other in a way that our states and countries need to prosper. How do you think about that sort of citizenship aspect in the education system?
First of all, it's an and, not an or, because you actually need the same skills, reading and comprehension. In the first few years of school, you learn to read, and then after third grade, you read to learn. And that, so you need to have those basic skills in place for civics education, for conflict resolution, for all of those things. So it is consistent with the academic goals of the K through 12 system. But above and beyond the academic goals, how do you deploy them? How do we include meaningful character education, conflict resolution, civic education? We signed a bill around being able to understand being media savvy, for example, and understanding, false from true. So these are things that not all kids get at home. In fact, there might be kids that grow up in an environment at home where their parents are subject to some of those falsehoods and misinformation. How do we give them the critical thinking skills to be able to tell fact from fiction, form your own opinions? It's not about opinions. It's about fact and falsehoods. And that is absolutely an important role of schools, but it's entirely consistent with the academic mission.
Let me ask you something about your transition from federal lawmaker to state leader and the role and connectivity between federal role in education and the very important state role. You mentioned earlier the importance of some of the federal funding that's been made available recently. Can you talk a little bit more about just lessons you learned moving from the federal to the state side when it comes to education? Where are the really critical touch points between those two areas?
Well, first of all, we are thrilled with some of the recent federal investments, like the child tax credit and earned income tax credit. And a lot of that will really make a difference for struggling families, low-income families, some of the direct aid to school districts to help make them whole and invest in their future. I served on the Education Committee during my time in Congress, and I was part of replacing No Child Left Behind with the Every Student Succeeds Act. In fact, that was the only conference committee that I wound up serving on in the 10 years I was there. It was the only one I requested to be on because I wanted to be really a formative part of that law, and a number of bills that I had written over the years were included in that law. We now operate under it at state level. I'm grateful for it. It's a much better law and framework than No Child Left Behind. So the Every Student Succeeds Act, nothing's perfect, but I think it establishes a sound federal framework rooted in civil rights, rooted in academic achievement, and it gives states the flexibility to make it work. The resources to make it work, not yet, but more resources are on the way with the recent passage of several bills and some of the proposals of the Biden administration.
Well, Governor, let me end with a more broad question. And, serving as a federal legislator certainly comes with its challenges, but serving as an executive responsible for an entire state, particularly during a crisis, obviously is a great challenge. We appreciate your service during that time and looking forward. I'm just interested in your thoughts on just generally anything else you want to leave us in terms of thoughts for the participants in the RISE conference on how we should be thinking about the role and approach to education in the coming years.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of look at what has worked and what hasn't worked in a very extraordinary year in the midst of a global pandemic. Cast the net broader than just our state and our country. People all over the world were grappling with some of these same issues. In many ways, the amount of learning that properly studied can occur from this last year, I think can accelerate education and make it more meaningful, impactful, and successful in so many different ways. It's an exciting time to be in education. It's an exciting time to say that just because we've done things a certain way for many years doesn't mean we should keep doing them that way. That involves everything from breaking down governance silos that people have constructed to really putting students and kids first in all of our endeavors. So I'm excited about the opportunity to build back stronger than ever from this pandemic and use the learning of the last year to help make sure the next generation of kids is better prepared than any generation before it for success.
Well, Governor Jared Polis, thank you so much for joining us over this connection from Colorado. Best wishes to you and all your and all the Coloradans, and we hope to be able to see you in person sometime soon.
I look forward to it, Glenn. Thank you. Take care.